have a peculiarity, and it comes from my dad, because he had that custom. And what is it? Since one was turning 10 years old, he gave him some flower seeds so that he could start his own cultivation since he was a child. Then the tradition of having flowers, making silletas, began as a hereditary culture. For example, this comes from generation to generation, and this is how the teaching remains for the children, then for the grandchildren. From a very young age, we had to do the crops, especially with small flowers. Before they said that women grew a lot because they had the most. Before they said that women grew a lot because they had the most delicate hands. For example, the flowers called pansies and others that are small are always cultivated by women, and we men grow the largest flowers. With the passage of time, we got used to this. We have dedicated our whole lives to that. The land must be prepared a month in advance so that when we use the fertilizers, they already have adequate fermentation. Crops and plants in general have different cycles. There are some that are fast, like sunflowers, which last between 90 and 100 days. Others, like the so-called always alive, they need 120 days, and some more, like the so-called buttercup, that need 5 months. All plants have different cycles, and those that are perennial have special pruning times so that they are at the right time. All plants have different cycles, and those that are perennial have special pruning times so that they are at the right time. One has to have knowledge of plant cycles to maintain crops well, because you can't do pruning by itself. This process has a set time for the plant to flower again at a certain time. For planting, you have to prepare the land, have organic fertilizer and compost, and when we do not have grass or loose terrain, place the plants. Depending on the cycle of the plant, it is also related to the amount of fertilizer it needs, because then a second application of fertilizer has to be made so that they are in bloom when required. Our country, Colombia, has varied climates and is very good for growing flowers, but in this place, or rather in open-air crops, it is different because we did not use artificial or chemical irrigation. Everything is more natural. That is why sometimes it is more difficult to cultivate them. If I grow in a greenhouse, the water is measured in the same way as the heat, so there is no danger of frost attacking, or that the sun is very strong, or perhaps that the amount of rain was much higher, and that is why the plants can be affected because they can be flooded. So outdoors is more complicated. However, plants also adapt to weather conditions, and as farmers we learn how to manage them. There are plants that need more humidity. For this reason, they are in the lower parts, and those that require less water go to the higher parts so that the rain evacuates faster. In the open air, the plants create more resistance, and that is why you will find crops interspersed with other plants, including aromatic herbs, with the aim of maintaining an ecological balance so that they are more resistant. In fact, in this garden, you see that we plant aromatic plants along with the flowers. But why and for what? Because the plant repels pests. The smell of these drives them away. One enters this garden after 6:30 p.m. The aroma is quite strong, so the pest does not affect the flowers at night. The aromatic ones generate such a strong smell that the flowers that are growing will feel protected. That's how things are in the field, and the beauty of growing flowers. There is something particular about flowers, and that is that the land of Santa Elena produces many varieties of flowers, especially those that us farmers call dry ranges. Like what? For example, this flower called buttercup. People know it as the flower of prosperity, because the farmers plant these flowers to sell them on December 31 of every year, because people believe in the prosperity that these flowers bring. Why do we call them dry range flowers? Because after you cut them from the crop, they no longer need hydration. They stay that way, and if you put them in water, you can damage them because the water rots them. It decomposes them. So that's why they are called dry flowers, because after they are harvested, they don't need hydration to live. As I said before, us farmers have the privilege of having many ranges of dried flowers in this land, and that is why we innovate in the Silleteras that are presented, because that lends itself to making a spectacular flower design. And they lend themselves to work. I particularly have been in many flower crops in the world, and this phenomenon occurs only in Santa Elena, where the flowers can be kept, stored without the need for hydration. As far as dried flowers are concerned, we have about 10 varieties. There's the buttercup, the seasons, the always alive. Rather, we have all the ranges. Another facet of dried flowers is that they are programmed. That is, we already know how many months they take to bloom, from planting to flowering. So we have all the flowers programmed, so that they are ready for the fair of the flowers, when more quantity is needed, to be able to make the Silleteras. In particular, I plant them all year round, in different amounts, but I don't like flowers of different varieties. But the people who go to work on Silleteras do plant them because they allow themselves to work at specific times, that is, about 4 months. From about 115 to 120 days later, when flowering begins, and one already knows in advance when the flower fair will take place. So one looks at the calendar and plants so that all the Silleteros have enough material to work. That is the range of dried flowers. The flower that grows in Santa Elena has something different that makes them very resistant, because despite being in a very high area, frost attacks little because there are warm currents very close. Here the canyon of the so-called Valle de Aburra gives us currents that are beneficial, and the cold ones are very few. Since the climate here is so cold, the flower is very resistant. We use the leaves of the forest because it provides us with various services. The first of which is that when it rains there is no erosion, because if the land is completely uncovered, it erodes a lot when it rains. On hot days like today, there are also consequences, because the plant can burn, so it affects the plant. The good thing about leaf litter is that when it decomposes, it becomes compost. That's why I say that we have many services. All the other flowers are from the roots, which means that the old plants, when the harvest and flowering are over, I take out the smaller cuttings of it, and I'm going to implement another crop. So from these seedlings I take out a smaller one, and I'm implementing a crop elsewhere because we have to improve. What we do with the plants is to take out a flower, plant it, and thus the crop expands so that it blooms well. A crop like this can generate flowers for about 3 months, and one cuts it several times to take out the smaller cuttings and implement crops elsewhere.
Esas son las flores de las plántulas de raíz.
How are you? Very good, thanks. And you? Well, I see that today has given you a lot. Yes, ma'am, we have to take advantage of the good weather, the summer, and we have to fix the bushes so that they continue to produce beautiful flowers. Look at you, this flower is already closed despite the sun that is making. That's right. These flowers sleep or close. That's the characteristic. I want to talk about another flower that is the emblem of Santa Elena, because its seed is one of the oldest that they brought to this land. It is almost one of the first that sprouted here, and for which our ancestors began to work the flowers here, and they are called stars of Bethlehem. These white flowers are, along with the daisies, the first to arrive in this area. The ones brought by the first flower growers in Santa Elena. This flower is long-lasting, as we see. It blooms, and all this green part ends up turning into a flower. Let's look here, it is just with an incipient flower, and in the end it ends up all full of flower, so it is very durable. Here I am cleaning these plants, removing all the flowers that are withered, and we also remove the grass that can compete for nutrients from the soil. This process has to be done every 2 months to maintain the crop well. The process to pick up the flower always has to be before 10 a.m. because if you cut them when there is already a lot of sun, they can wither faster. You are also aware of what you are going to cut, and so you're aware of taking the flowers to a shady place where you have water to put the flowers there and that they have quick hydration, so there would be no problem. These flowers that we see here are very old in Santa Elena. They are called white cartridges. These flowers, as everyone can see, have a thick, strong and heavy stem. This range of flowers, along with the stars of Bethlehem, were the ones used by the ancestors to make their silletas, and that is why they were so heavy. Therefore, the tradition that farmers must be prepared to carry a heavy load. From there, the silletas were invented to tie the flowers there and take them to the city. For example, the old families were large, for example 15, 18 to 20 children. So everyone, from the oldest to the youngest, would put together some silletas and take the flowers to the city. And that is why there were long lines of silleteros. We had that tradition, and now they tell us that we carried flowers since we were 5 years old, and they are right, because, for example, when I was little, I already went to Medellín with flowers. We represent not only Santa Elena and not only Antioquia. We Silleteros are recognized throughout the world, and this is a source of pride. And although I don't go to the parade, I only say that without flowers there are no silletas. I talk to my flowers. I tell them, for example, you're going to stay there without blooming. If it's bored, I'll pluck it and bring another one. So I talk to all my flowers and tell them that the time has come to flower, that there are visitors who want to see them, and it seems that they understand. At the time when the stars of Bethlehem arrived, the white cartridges, the gladioli, in ancient times, there were only about 5 varieties of flowers, and even so, they made this land known. Another famous flower in this region is the so-called crispy daisy. This flower, almost all of it multiplies very easily. It is reproduced in another batch, and it comes out with a very beautiful production. This daisy was exported from Santa Elena about 70 years ago to the Caribbean region and many cities in Colombia. Another flower that moved the economy a lot was the Star of Bethlehem, which was also sent in large quantities to other regions about 80 years ago. And people began to see that Santa Elena was a power for flowers. Many farmers and producers stopped growing vegetables to change them for flowers. Trade and times have changed. In 1947, for example, my father exported flowers to Panama, and the dollar cost about 80 cents. Now, the dollar is very expensive, but everything goes ahead and the crops are underway. Currently, it is necessary to have permits and certifications to follow in my father's footsteps. For this reason, I need an agronomist to certify my flowers to take them abroad. For this reason, now I have to decide whether to export or have a farm suitable for tourism. We have the privilege of working with flowers all year round. For example, I grow the flower and then sell it. I already know which flower to plant for each season and thus have the capacity to have a rotating economy all year round so that I make a living from flowers. They give me the facility to support the family with my own work, and I don't need to be looking for other resources. I'm not saying, oh, the flower is not for sale, because it's not true. The flower is for sale. What happens is that you have to know the season for each flower, because the whole year is not suitable for the same flower. You have special dates in which any variety is sold. For example, on Women's Day, which is March 8, all flowers are sold, as well as on Secretary's Day or Mother's Day, when they sell all varieties of flowers. Later, with the flower fairs, they all need each other, so as my dad used to say, you have to find a way out of each situation, a very rural expression, so that the crop gives you economy for your livelihood and that of your family. I have a lot to thank the flowers for because we have lived from them and we will continue to live much more. Now, with some circumstances in the current situation, but this will not be something from Colombia, but from the world. Among all of us, we have to get ahead. And what happened after the pandemic is just thinking about recovery. As adults, we may not have to see the prosperity that will come. But the young people who come behind will have promising times. And pay a lot of attention and care. I congratulate you all, and I love you very much. I am a Silletero. Thank God I won the parade in 2018. And I feel very proud to have my crop, to live in the countryside, and that we are going to get out of the pandemic. And next year, we are going to enjoy everything that us farmers do. After the pandemic, we will be happier.